hope that enables us to believe that God can transform even the most hopeless cases. We know that our God is powerful to do anything. We know He is good. So we are full of hope. We are still walking with those men, women, and children we rescued from the rice mill. Their lives are not perfect, but they are no longer slaves. These women, men, and children that I, a girl who was once only cold and calculating, that I was able to help rescue. God hears the cries of the oppressed. He heard the cry of my heart. And whatever the cry of your heart is today, He hears this too. So let's allow Him to guide us. We are called to serve because our lives belong to God. And in this we can rejoice because He is a God who is good. Thank you.
Okay, just to recap some of what we just heard there. Of course, our ministries are different than Pranitha's, but there are some things that are very similar. We need the courage to act where we're called to lead. Two of the quotes that struck me, one of them was this one here. She says, "She has a physical pain that has never left me, and this pain constantly reminds me that I need God and that His grace is sufficient for me." Maybe sometimes you feel like a leader, as one person expressed it, with a limp, with a brokenness, with an imperfection, with you look at yourself and you say, there's something about me that makes me not the ideal leader for this leading that needs doing. But that very imperfection, that very pain, that very limp is that place where God is constantly reminding you that it's not all about you and your strength, but it's all about you putting yourself in His hands and His grace being sufficient. She also said a little bit later on that she was able to empathize with the children and the others that they were rescuing from slavery. And as she talked about again at the end, that she remembered that she was someone who was delivered from being CC, from being cold and calculating, to being somebody who was able to be used by God. And imagine if each one of our ministries were continually similarly founded, that we continually remember the core of our own story as having been rescued, as having been redeemed. And that's a place where courage comes from. But her lessons that I wanted us to reflect on for just a minute, with the question, are these lessons relevant to our leading today? She said, number one, that we're called to serve by a God already at work. She said, number two, that our life belongs to God. And she pointed out that she makes a willful decision that her life is God's and that her strength is His. And that's the basis for getting any work done. And we're given vivid examples of that through the finding of the truck, through the confusion of the mob. And she said that God is good. God is good when there's evidence that God is good, and she had a number of sort of refrains of evidence. But also God is good when we don't see the evidence. God hears our cries, and He hears the cry of our heart and of those we call to serve. My guess is that if we were to have Moses and Deborah and Barnabas in our class today, that they would probably reflect these same realities, that they too are called to serve, that they too recognize that their life belongs to God, that they too recognize that God is good. And it's my hope through some of this reflecting that we've done that we too will be able to lead with the kind of courage that comes not from trying to throw more of ourselves at our leading, but that comes from humbly walking before God and putting ourselves in His hands and trusting that He is good and that He will lead. I want to transition us now from talking about courage to talking about adaptive challenge. And that might feel at first like a big shift, right? That suddenly we're talking about something very spiritual, right? Even biblical examples, We're talking about having courage in leading, and that resonates where we live. And now we're talking about that stuff that we did in the reading, especially the second chapter about the distinction between technical and adaptive challenges. We're going to watch a short video on technical and adaptive challenges. But first, my guess is that probably half of us in the room, when we read this stuff on technical versus adaptive challenges, we're going, huh? How come I don't get this? How come this feels so confusing to me? Why can't he put it in simpler language yet? Although I think he is trying to put it in as simple language as he can. And there are probably half of us who were saying, I know this stuff. I know this stuff inside and out. Why does he keep going over the same point all the time? Now, I'd like us to sort of glean from each other as a group, both before and after we view the video, about the distinction between technical and adaptive challenges. So, here's an opportunity for you to speak. Who would like to give us their sense about what is a technical challenge and what is an adaptive challenge? Don't feel like you have to be perfectly accurate, but let's try to unpack this together and enter into sort of the fog of these two different ways of thinking about challenges. Anybody? Go ahead.
I can try to give it a shot.
Yes, thank you.
When I think of technical, I'm thinking that it's more on your day-to-day management. It's technical. It's something that needs to get done. We can see it. Someone can get it done. No issues there. It's pretty easy. It's clear.
It's
needs
clear.
To get done.
Yep.
When we think about adaptive, we're thinking about changes. We're thinking long-term, visionary, where at times we do not want to go because we have to change in order to be there, and we're happy the way we are. So we tend to be a little bit more reluctant to go towards the adaptive type of leadership.
That's very good. That's very good, and I think very, very much on point. Anybody else? Aaron?
As you were saying that, I thought like technical sort of like a chore, and adaptive is work. Chore being something you just have to do, but work, like you really have to put something into it.
Okay.
To figure it out.
So distinguishing between a chore, like something you have to do, and work that becomes a larger project, or more difficult. Okay, so go ahead, more.
I think the same with that. Technical is about known knowledge that most people would agree you could bring an expert or someone that with known ability in to fix. For an adaptive change is more about getting a collective of people to change inherently values, beliefs, those things that we will hold on to and we will derail you as the leader, even unknowingly, even subconsciously, because we just want to hold on to our equilibrium, into the state that we're in, and we may not even be aware of it.
Very good, very good. And especially the distinction of when it's an adaptive challenge, that people will want to challenge you as a leader, right? That you can't rely on this expertise thing, that there's this embodiment of this change that is just more nebulous and harder. Yeah, go ahead.
I think of technical as like just something like a task, exactly like everybody was saying. I have to write the leaves. Okay, I've been delegated to write the leaves. It's not a big deal. I can write the leaves, or I can rebel against it. But adaptive would be more of a shift in your whole person, your heart, your way of thinking, your spirituality, your emotional, your values, your morals. It's like that shift, you know, like when somebody is not a believer, let's say, and then they shift and they do become a believer. So you're changing everything up inside of yourself,
Yeah.
and that is terrifying for a lot of people. So
Good. Especially highlighting the reality that adaptive challenges can be terrifying, right? That's not too strong of a word.
well, some people don't even want to cut their hair.
Right.
They've had it like that for 30 years. It's
Yeah.
safe. They know it's just fine. They don't need to change it. So
Right.
it's the same with their heart.
Very good. Very good. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, I think technical is more like a system, you know, and leadership would be more something that leaders would do, A and B and C and D. And adaptive, it's more like when people actually have to do something for themselves and change and make some decisions and make some choices and do things differently in their own life. And I think that's where, you know, adaptive kind of takes that risk, because as a leader, you have to say to somebody, take that chance that, that, you know what, if you want to get to B, then you've got to maybe think about making these decisions and these different choices in your own life, and having that kind of conversation is